Halloween is supposed to be fun, until the masks stop coming off. Story 1. The crisp ache of autumn always brought me back to my childhood street on Halloween. I walked under the skeletal fingers of oak trees, breathing in the familiar scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. The nostalgia was thick, a comforting blanket woven from memories of pillowcase sacks bulging with candy and the thrill of being someone else for a night. Distant shouts and laughter from younger trick-or-treaters echoed, a happy ghost of my own past. That's when I first saw him. He was standing under a flickering streetlight at the end of the block, separate from the packs of tiny vampires and superheroes. He was too tall to be a child, too still to be a parent waiting. His costume was simple, almost lazy. Dark overalls and a cheap plastic ghost mask, the kind with droopy, sad-looking eye holes that you'd find in a bargain bin. I thought nothing of it, and turned onto Maple Avenue, the crunch of leaves under my boots the only sound. I walked for a minute, admiring a porch swarming with carved pumpkins, their grins lit from within. When I glanced back at the intersection, he was there again, standing, watching. A sliver of unease pricked my skin. I quickened my pace, telling myself it was just a coincidence. But at the next corner, as I looked over my shoulder, he was there, halfway down the block now. He hadn't moved closer in a rush. He had simply arrived. He moved without sound, without effort, a glitch in the festive landscape. He wasn't following me. He was anticipating me. My heart hammered against my ribs. The joyful sounds of the holiday now seemed distant and mocking. I cut through a small park, a shortcut home, the grass damp and cold. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I just focused on the warm, safe rectangle of my own front door, now visible up the street. As my hand closed around the cold brass of the doorknob, I risked one last look. He was at the edge of my lawn. The distance between us had vanished. He stood perfectly motionless, head tilted slightly. Through the misshapen eye holes of that cheap plastic mask, I couldn't see eyes. I saw only a profound and patient darkness. Then, a sound drifted across the lawn, thin and wet, a soft chuckle that promised nothing good. I scrambled inside, slamming and locking the door. But the image was burned into my mind. It wasn't the mask I saw when I closed my eyes, but the chilling certainty of what was behind it. Story 2. The air on Halloween always had the same scent, a nostalgic mix of cold asphalt, decaying leaves, and the cloying sweetness of sugar. I was walking the long way home, cutting through the old suburban labyrinth of my childhood. Porch lights cast a warm orange glow on laughing ghouls and miniature superheroes, their plastic buckets rattling with treasure. For a moment, I was 10 again, the rough fabric of a homemade ghost costume scratching my chin. That's when I first saw him. At the far end of Miller's Lane, standing under a flickering streetlight, was a scarecrow. It was a good costume, lanky, unnaturally still, with a burlap sack for a head. I smiled, appreciating the commitment, and turned onto Elm Street. The familiar houses, with their jack-o'-lanterns grinning with flickering teeth, calmed the slight unease his stillness had caused. 2 blocks later, I glanced over my shoulder. My blood went cold. At the corner I had just turned, under another streetlight, stood the same scarecrow. It was impossible. He hadn't been walking, and I would have heard him run. Yet there he was, one arm hanging slightly lower than the other, his head tilted in my direction. I picked up my pace, my sneakers crunching on brittle leaves. This is a prank, I told myself. A stupid Halloween prank. I didn't look back again. My own street was just ahead, a beacon of safety. I could already see the familiar glow of my own porch light. The sound started then, a soft, rhythmic drag on the pavement behind me. Shush. Drag. Shush. Drag. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was the sound of straw-stuffed limbs being pulled across the ground. My heart hammered against my ribs. I broke into a run, fumbling for my keys. I risked one last, terrified glance. He was closer now, much closer. The streetlight illuminated him fully. The burlap sack over his head wasn't a mask. It was stretched taut over a long, narrow shape beneath, something with contours that were disturbingly wrong. Two mismatched button eyes were sewn onto the fabric, and in the stark light, I swear I saw them glint with a wet, organic sheen. I slammed the door behind me, deadbolt clattering into place. I leaned against the wood, gasping for air, my body trembling. Silence. The muffled laughter of trick-or-treaters drifted from down the street. It was over. I was safe. Then came the sound from the other side of the door. Not a knock, not a footstep. A long, slow scratch, like a single dry twig being dragged deliberately down the wood, from top to bottom. And then it started again. Story 3. The crisp autumn air, usually a comforting herald of my favorite holiday, felt brittle tonight. Halloween. It used to be a night of pure magic, a symphony of rustling leaves, the distant clang of a doorbell, and the sweet, cloying scent of pumpkin spice. Now, as I stood on my porch, the familiar scent was tinged with something metallic, something unsettling, like old pennies left too long in the rain. My house, usually adorned with grinning jack-o'-lanterns and cheerful cobwebs, felt exposed. The porch light, a weak halo against the encroaching darkness, seemed to barely push back the shadows that clawed at the edges of my vision. Every rustle of leaves was a whisper, every distant car door slam a gunshot. It was ridiculous, I knew. I was an adult, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. There was nothing to be afraid of. But the memory of that Halloween, years ago, was a persistent chill. I was younger, maybe 10. My best friend Sarah and I had been out trick-or-treating, our plastic pumpkin buckets heavy with candy. A stranger, dressed as a clown with 2 wide eyes and a painted smile that didn't reach his eyes, had stood on a lawn, not handing out candy, just watching. He'd been unnervingly still, a stark contrast to the boisterous energy of the other costumed figures. Sarah had tugged my arm, her small hand clammy in mine, and we'd hurried away. The clown hadn't moved, his gaze seemingly following us until we rounded the corner. Tonight, the trick-or-treaters were a blur of plastic masks and cheap polyester costumes. Their excited shrieks, usually music to my ears, now scraped against my nerves. Each group that approached the house, their faces hidden behind identical printed smiles or monstrous grimaces, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I'd hand out candy, my movements jerky, my eyes scanning the street, the darkened windows of houses across the way, the dense line of trees at the end of the block. Then I saw it. Or rather, I felt it. A distinct prickle on the back of my neck. Not the cold of the night, but a deliberate, oppressive gaze. I turned, slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. No one was immediately there. The stream of children had thinned, their laughter receding into the distance. But the feeling persisted, a weight pressing down on me. It was the same feeling I'd had as a child, the unsettling sensation of being observed by something that didn't belong. A shadowy figure detached itself from the deeper darkness beneath the oak tree across the street. It wasn't a child, nor an adult in a typical Halloween costume. It was tall, unnaturally so, and shrouded in a cloak that seemed to absorb the meager light. Its face was obscured, a void where features should have been. It didn't move like the others, no clumsy gait or excited hop. It glided, a silent predator. I fumbled with the doorknob, my fingers numb and clumsy. The cheerful glow of my porch light felt like a beacon, an invitation. The figure paused, its head tilting slightly, as if contemplating me. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken threat. The nostalgic thrill of Halloween had curdled into something cold and primal. I wasn't just a homeowner handing out candy anymore. I was prey. And the night, once my favorite, was now a suffocating, terrifying shroud. The figure took a step forward, and I finally slammed the door shut, the click of the lock echoing like a death knell in the sudden, suffocating silence of my home.